December 1998, Lindsay Quai vanishes on Christmas Day. A police missing persons inquiry fails, and a family is torn apart. But a visitor from beyond the grave appears to a psychic in a nightmarish vision.
She told me she'd been carnaged and mangled. She was trying to tell us that she'd been brutally murdered. Then she flashed the railway line. I could see the railway track, and I feel that's where she was telling me this is where she had been killed. And it was for me to go and help her.
Is Lindsay missing, or is she dead? And can a psychic discover the truth behind her disappearance? Southport, northwest England, deserted now, but every summer this seaside town attracts millions of visitors. Most come to breathe in the sea air, stretch out on the miles of empty beaches and enjoy the thrills of the roller coaster. But this man is no tourist. He is psychic Joe Power, and he's been drawn here by a missing girl and a nightmare he will never forget. The story starts here in December 1998. Lindsay Quai is a 21-year-old wife and mother of 2 small children.
Lindsay was a very kind person, do anything for anybody. Good mother.
The Quais are just an average family preparing for the holidays, but on Christmas Day 1998, their lives change forever when Lindsay mysteriously vanishes. Days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months, and still nobody hears from Lindsay. Her family begin to suspect that something is very wrong.
Well, you know, anyone goes missing in your family, it's just undescribable, the feelings you get. Everyone was worrying, and our brains were going, swirling, we weren't sleeping, we weren't eating. It was just a great worry.
In February, Southport police take a statement from Lindsay's distraught husband, Mitchell.
He said that she'd gone out drinking with her friends and that she'd stayed out all night, and he'd been left alone with the 2 children in the house and had woken with them on his own on Christmas Day, and went on to say that Lindsay had arrived later on the Christmas morning, still under the influence of drink, went into a shower, didn't say anything, got a few clothes together, and then left without saying anything to the children. Sometime in the January, he'd seen her in a vehicle with a guy who he didn't know, at a junction in Southport somewhere, and he presumed that she'd just started a new life.
Since then, nobody has seen or heard from Lindsay. Police class her as a missing person, and working with her husband Mitchell, start a high-profile nationwide appeal for her return.
We had a press conference, which he attended, and he reiterated the story that he'd given to the police.
She came in the morning, she was out of her face. She came in at 7 o'clock in the morning. She went straight up to bed, and I got the kids up then, opened the presents up. She showed no kind of interest in the kids on Christmas Day. We'd had trouble in our relationship, and we decided to separate before Christmas. But we were going to stay together through Christmas. I thought I was going to leave after New Year, but she's up and left before then.
Lindsay's father, Peter Wilson, makes an appeal to his daughter.
I just say, you know, if Lindsay's watching this, no one's blaming her for what she's done, you know, leaving the children. And we'd like to contact the police as soon as possible.
Psychic Joe Power has been following the case in the press, but late one night in February, he has a nightmare that he thinks is a message from the spirit world.
I'd gone to sleep. It was like any ordinary night. During my sleep, I heard a phone ring, and 2 people appeared to me.
Joe recognizes the woman from the newspapers as housewife Lindsay Quai, but police think she is a missing person. Joe claims that the spirit of Lindsay is trying to tell him she's been murdered, who her killer is, and where to find her body.
Lindsay Quai told me she had been carnaged and mangled.
Joe's vision is incredibly violent and shocks him to this day.
And then she told me for the police to search the railway, and also as well, the police must search the fairground.
But why did Lindsay want these two areas searched? As the images intensify, Joe receives more information.
I heard McDowell's, and I actually seen McDowell's, so I was hearing it and I was seeing it. And I also heard her say tractors.
Joe is confused and distressed by his vision. He turns to friend, retired police support worker Frida Valentine for advice.
He started telling me that he'd been visited by Lindsay Quai in a dream, and she said, please help me. I am desperate for somebody to recognise that I have been murdered. I am not a missing person.
Frida is shocked by what Joe tells her.
I think he really believed that she had been cut up. With him saying about the mangled carnage, it more or less looked as though they couldn't see or recognise any parts of the body.
Joe also tells Frida where he thinks Lindsay might be buried.
He told me that he'd been shown the railway track and also the fairground in Southport. I suggested to Joe that he go to the police and give all this information.
Reluctantly, Joe follows Frida's advice.
I was absolutely terrified going into a police station. I thought they would think I was the murderer, going in with so much detailed and accurate information.
But no detectives from the Missing Persons Inquiry Team is available, so Joe gives a full statement to another officer.
And she reassured me that that information would be passed on to the officers in charge.
If information comes in from a psychic or a medium that we feel can be corroborated or will send us in a certain direction, then my view is that we will always utilise that if it helps us. But the problem with that is that quite often it's not supported by any tangible evidence.
Joe never hears back from the police regarding his statement. As far as they're concerned, this is still a missing persons case.
But it was very frustrating to me because at that time I knew this was a murder case and not a missing persons.
Joe is determined to discover more about Lindsay Quai's mysterious disappearance. Has she been killed? Was she buried in the fairground or the railway? And could Joe convince the police Lindsay is not a missing person and a killer is walking free? A young mother, Lindsay Quai, has gone missing. Police have no clue to her whereabouts. Her husband has appealed for her safe return, but in a terrifying vision, psychic Joe Power sees a woman being killed and dismembered. Is this Lindsay? Should police be hunting a murderer? Joe is determined to find out.
I felt I had to investigate this case myself because the police were not listening, and I felt I had a sense of duty to get this young lady's remains found.
Joe drives to Southport. He has no map and he doesn't know the area. All he has is his confusing list of locations from Lindsay. The railway, the fairground, McDowell's, and a tractor yard. After hours in the car, Joe is tired and lost. He's convinced his psychic connection to Lindsay has failed until he reaches a certain road completely by chance.
It was just around this part here that I heard a voice crystal clear, and a sudden noise shouted, "Stop!" And I turned to the right, pulled up the car, and for no apparent reason at all is that the car horn started to go off. I got out of the car, pulled the bonnet, eventually it went off. And I got back in the car and I decided, with the car horn going off, that I'd get away from the area because of the neighbours and the sound, and I felt really quite frightened at that stage. And I drove around on the next street. But just before I'd actually got to the bottom of the road, there was a place called McDowell's that was on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side was another place full of tractors. That's when it all sunk into me that this is where she had actually sent me.
Both the tractor yard and McDowell's are on Stamford Road, the very road where Lindsay lived with husband Mitchell and her 2 children. Joe is now convinced that the woman who appeared to him was Lindsay Quai. But why is she drawing him here?
After I left the area, I felt shocked, I felt disturbed, But I also felt, it's strange to say this, is reassurance in the images that I had actually received.
Once again, Joe decides to contact the police. This time, he writes a letter to the head of the missing person investigation, Bob Marsden.
I wrote to Bob Marsden and told him that I was no ordinary person. I was doing this because this young lady had appeared to me, and this case needs to be looked at in more detail.
Joe receives this receipt for his letter, but the police do not call.
I believe Joe was getting very, very frustrated because he'd informed all the police, and yet they still believed that she was actually missing.
Sometime after Joe's letter arrived at Southport Police Headquarters, a review of the missing persons inquiry is ordered. Detective Superintendent Jeff Sloan is brought in to re-examine all the evidence. Immediately, his instincts as a police officer tell him something is not right.
There was a lot of circumstantial evidence which tended towards the fact that Lindsay was not alive. We couldn't establish any proof of life.
Lindsay hasn't used her bank account since before Christmas. She hasn't applied for income support or housing benefit. Vital medical appointments have been missed, and she has had no contact with her family, not the actions of either a runaway or a loving mother.
When I read through the documents and I read through the lifestyle and some of the issues that emanated from that missing from home inquiry, I formed the opinion quite quickly that this actually should be a murder inquiry. I felt that Lindsay had been murdered.
Joe Power is no longer alone in his belief that Lindsay has been killed.
It's very frustrating, you know, knowing that this young lady had been cornered and mangled, and you have to sit there and wait for her to be found.
Detective Superintendent Jeff Sloan is placed in charge of the new murder inquiry, but this isn't going to be an easy case to crack.
It's very frustrating not to have a body because when you have a body, that's where your lines of inquiry start to develop. All we had was 22 Stamford Road, which was Lindsay's home address, where she'd lived with Mitchell. Well, the very first thing that we do is to go back and fully search the house again, the gardens and the area immediately surrounding the house.
Using the house as their starting point, the police begin one of the largest searches ever conducted in mainland England.
And we actually used officers from the Royal Air Force, the JARIC, which is a reconnaissance organisation, who flew over and could detect any recently disturbed ground. And if they highlighted any areas, then we would send a specialist search team to go and excavate.
It's an agonizing time for Lindsay's family.
We're by the phone 24/7, and sometimes we get false information where bones had been found at one time. And we were given the information, then we found out it was a pig, a dead pig. And then when you heard about a body being found and this, that, and the other, one was found in the River Ribble, I think, you wondered if that was Lindsay. It's never ending.
But the police failed to find any evidence of Lindsay.
I was concerned that we hadn't found a body, and I was at a loss as to where we would look to next, and took the decision that we wouldn't undertake any more searches or digging until it was based on intelligence that we had through. But it was frustrating for me.
The police are forced to suspend all searches, but Lindsay's parents refuse to give up hope. They spend every waking moment looking for their daughter.
Well, we searched in canals, rivers, we got stung by bees, hornets, you name it. But, you know, I used to be up to my neck sometimes in freezing cold water. We couldn't stop. It was just our way of contributing towards finding Lindsay.
With the police search on hold and no new information coming forward, it looks as if Lindsay's body may never be found and the case remain unsolved. But Psychic Joe Power believes this is something the spirit world would never allow. Joe thinks Lindsay's spirit is unable to rest, as once again she appears to him with a message from beyond the grave.
The second time Lindsay appeared to me was at my home address, and she came to me and told me that the police were not listening to the information that I had previously provided to them.
Joe's first vision led him to Lindsay's house. Now he returns to Southport to search the fairground and railway track. He has a feeling that these areas are in some way connected to her disappearance. He starts at the railway track. Joe doesn't know what he should be looking for. He's hoping his psychic powers will be his guide.
When I walked along this particular part of the railway line, my hair stood up on my hand and I heard a voice, I believe that was Lindsay, telling me is that she was in this location.
But if Lindsay is buried at the railway, why does Joe want the police to search the fairground as well?
It was quite clear to me is that this young lady's remains were in two separate locations.
But Joe Power fails to find any evidence that Lindsay is in this location. For Detective Superintendent Sloan, the case is equally baffling, with no new leads coming in. He decides to re-examine the original witness testimonies. He wants to build a picture of Lindsay's last known movements.
We believe Lindsay had been shopping on the 15th of December and had actually made a call to the benefits agency, and she made an inquiry about a missing cheque, which should have been issued in the November. As a result of that conversation, she was sent out a disclaimer form, which was never ever received and never ever recovered by the police. It was after that phone call, basically, that Lindsay ceased to exist.
Detective Superintendent Sloan discovers that the only person who claims to have seen Lindsay alive after December 16th was her husband, Mitchell Quai. He told police she left him and abandoned her children on Christmas Day. Detective Superintendent Sloan is suspicious. He has a feeling Mitchell's statement doesn't ring true. It doesn't fit with the profile he has built of Lindsay.
Given the background of Lindsay, what her upbringing was, the way she was interacted with her children, that there was no way she would have walked out on her children on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day.
Police take a closer look at Lindsay and Mitchell's relationship.
Mitchell was very violent towards Lindsay over a number of years, and ultimately she did try to institute divorce proceedings from him. But the issue was then that she'd always accepted Mitchell back and they'd always be reconciled.
Could Mitchell really be her killer? Was this why Lindsay's spirit led Joe to her road? Was she trying to tell him that this was the murder scene? It's been 9 months since Lindsay Quai disappeared in Southport, northwest England. Detective Superintendent Jeff Sloan believes that Lindsay has been murdered, just as psychic Joe Power said over 7 months earlier. Joe's nightmarish vision had started a psychic investigation that took him to Southport Fairground, the railway track, and Lindsay's own home. But what significance did these locations have? All is to be revealed as police close in on their prime suspect, Lindsay's husband, Mitchell Quai.
Well, Mitchell portrayed an image of he was the abandoned father, the abandoned husband, and that, sadly for us, he was very plausible in front of the media. He was very confident, overconfident sometimes. He seemed to be reaching out to the community, and a lot of people seemed to be believing him and formed the opinion that perhaps the police were just picking him out because he seemed the obvious candidate for a suspect.
In June 2000, Detective Superintendent Jeff Sloan trusts his instincts and arrests Mitchell Quai on suspicion of murdering his 21-year-old wife, Lindsay.
Well, Mitchell was an egotist, and I actually felt that he formed the opinion that he could get away with this because of the time element and the fact that the media had shown such an interest in him, and various members of the community were sympathetic to him.
But despite hours of questioning, Mitchell refuses to crack. Detective Superintendent Sloan is convinced that he has his man, but he doesn't have enough evidence to press charges. It looks like Mitchell is about to walk.
Basically stuck to his story, but when we listened to the interviews, his responses and his replies, I got from the psychologist that we were starting really to get to him and he was becoming quite low and down in this. And I think the telling point came when I gave instructions within his hearing that his father was to be charged and so was his brother.
Phone records show that at key points in the investigation, Mitchell made an unusually large number of calls to his brother Elliot and his father. This was totally out of character, and Detective Superintendent Sloan thought it pointed to their involvement.
The arrest of Elliot and the subsequent arrest of Mitchell's father had quite pronounced impact on Mitchell, because I think he felt that he'd actually succeeded in convincing members of the public, the press, and to a certain degree the police, that he was right and that Lindsay had just disappeared. He thought it would go away. And I got the impression that when he realised that we did mean business and that they too had been arrested, that reality started to creep in, and the realisation was that he wasn't going to get away with it. I made the decision that I was going to charge Mitchell with murder, and within a very, very short space of time, I was contacted on my mobile to tell me that Mitchell had actually admitted that he had in fact killed Lindsay.
Over a year after Lindsay Quai first went missing, the truth surrounding her disappearance is finally uncovered.
The last few hours of Lindsay's life all centred around the cheque that had gone missing in November. Mitchell, at some stage, had tried to encash that cheque. There's a row developed over that, and he's lost his control and he's strangled her.
As Mitchell's confession continues, the true horrific nature of the crime is revealed.
And that's when he recruited Elliot to come in and to help him to dispose of the body. And that's when he decided that he and Elliot would cut the body up in the bath with the children asleep in bed in the next room, which I thought was horrific.
The images of violence in Joe's dream were now explained. Lindsay was dismembered, just as Joe had said. And the scene of the crime? Lindsay's house on Stamford Road, the very place Joe had been led to 12 months earlier. How did he know these facts?
I knew 100% I'd been right all the time. It was a very emotional case and a very upsetting case.
Mitchell Quai leads police officers to the locations where he buried his wife's remains.
Lindsay's torso was found near to the Pleasureland theme park at Southport, behind a go-kart racing track where Mitchell used to work. We found Lindsay's legs on the railway embankment, which was near to one of the first places they resided together.
Joe had asked for these locations to be searched over 12 months earlier.
I knew straight away. It didn't come as a surprise for me. What you've got to remember is how powerful these images, what she had shown to me. She'd already shown me the fairground. She'd shown me the railway.
But unfortunately for Joe, at that time he was working alone. He never did receive the call to help the police. But Joe believes there is one person who recognizes the part he played in this case.
Lindsay briefly appeared to me after her remains were actually found, and I heard her say thank you, and there was no more contact from this young lady.
On January 16th, 2001, Mitchell Quai is sentenced.
Mitchell was sentenced to a mandatory life term of imprisonment with a tariff of 18 years because of the severity of the way he disposed of his wife, Lindsay.
Elliot Quai receives 7 years for his part in the gruesome murder. Mitchell's father is released without charge.
This case was extremely difficult to crack, not least because of the way that she was murdered, the way she was disposed of, and the way that he behaved after the murder, actually actively seeking the press and seeking public opinion on his side and sympathy.
Detective Superintendent Sloan receives a special commendation for the integral part he played in the capture and conviction of this most devious of killers. Joe Power's personal investigation is as yet unrecognized.
When the killers were caught, I was very satisfied that I'd done my job. All the detail and all the information that had been provided made me feel very, very satisfied, not only just for me, but for Lindsay Quai's parents as well. It was a very emotional case and a very upsetting case.
To lose Lindsay that way has affected everybody, the whole family, me included. Never going to be the same again. Still suffering now. We'll just be suffering until the day we die. Peter, my eldest son, hung himself in the loft at my house. Could never get over the fact of what they did to Lindsay after they'd murdered her. That's what led to his suicide.
2 years after her vicious murder, Lindsay is finally able to rest in peace. but she leaves behind a family torn apart by tragedy.
Mitchell's taken my daughter. He's taken Robin and Jack's mother. He's taken my son, Peter, because I blame him for that as well. He's taken a lot off the family, which we'll never forgive him for.
A loved husband and father goes missing. His wife is frantic to find him.
I gotta get to him, we gotta find him.
A psychic finds herself as a go-between, relaying clues she believes come from the man who's gone missing.
It's Fickle, it's Fickle.
Will this clue help police solve the mysterious disappearance?
I could see the sincerity in her face. She believed what she was telling me.
He wants to be found.
March 1st, 1997, in the small town of Sharpsville, Pennsylvania, local chef Daryl Cozart headed out on Saturday night after work. He hasn't returned home to his wife Jeanette and their 2 small children. She knows something's not right.
He told me he was gonna go to see some friends at a bar, which was very unusual for him. Daryl didn't usually go hang out with friends. He was a really family man.
On Sunday, when Daryl still hasn't returned home, Jeanette Cozart reports him missing to the police. To them, it's just a missing person case.
It's not uncommon for a spouse to report somebody missing who maybe run off with some friends to get away for a few days.
I knew something had to have happened to him for him not to contact me and not to let us know he's okay.
Usually within 48 hours, the person appears back at home and maybe has to eat a little crow or has some patching up to do at home, but they always come back.
They pretty much just told me, don't worry. He's probably just on a drinking binge. And I'm like, no, this is not my husband. He didn't do those kind of things. He went to work, he came home. This is not what he did.
Police weren't aware of any problems at home or what would make him run off.
They told me that it would be 72 hours, of course, before they could list him as a missing persons. And that's when we kind of took matters into our own hands and started making flyers up because we were frustrated. I just thought, well, maybe he's hurt. I gotta get to him, we gotta find him.
Jeanette's mother drops off some missing person flyers at the newsstand owned by psychic Mary Ellen Rodriguez. Her son-in-law, Daryl Cozart's been missing now for 2 days.
She handed me the missing persons paper. When I touched it, it seemed like the energy of Daryl, all of a sudden, it opened something up, and there was Daryl standing next to her. Here was Mary on this side of me, and here was Daryl on this side of me, and I'm watching 2 worlds going on at the same time. Here's Daryl on the other side with his hands pressed against like a wall saying, just show me where the door is, just show me where the door is. And just show me where the doorway is so I can come back. I need to come back. I said, Mary, he's dead. He's dead. He's standing right next to you. And she turned and looked and still wasn't aware of him there like I was. I saw him as if I could touch him, and I saw her knowing I could touch her.
Jeanette's mother tells her daughter of the bizarre encounter she had that morning. Jeanette goes to the newsstand. She hopes this total stranger, Mary Ellen, will be able to help her find Daryl.
I walked in and Mary Ellen walked up to me and she put her arms around me and just held me.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Jeanette.
she just kept repeating, I'm so sorry. I'm so, so sorry.
I am so sorry.
She told me that that wasn't her, and it was Daryl telling me he was sorry. He was just so, so sorry.
Mary Ellen explains to Jeanette it is Daryl speaking and acting through her.
I said, he's standing there next to you. He's so sorry. I said, he's trying to find his way back. I said, but he can't come back.
She had told me that he was shot, that we would find him, and he would have a rope around his neck.
So sorry.
Mary Ellen says she became a conduit between two worlds, with Daryl pushing her to relay messages to Jeanette.
Daryl kept saying to me, ghost, tell her ghost. I just said to her, does ghost mean anything to you? And she reared back and put her hand up and said, yes, that was our favorite movie.
The moment she said it, I had chills from my head down to my toes. And at that moment, I knew it was him, and that this was the real thing, and that no matter how much I wanted him to be here on Earth with us, he was no longer.
Later the same day, Mary Ellen gets another visitor, Detective Jerry Smith.
Hi, Jerry. How are you tonight?
He's a policeman in the town just next to Sharpsville, the town where Daryl Cozart lived.
When Jerry came in, I said to him, you know that guy that's missing, he's dead.
First I looked at her like, you know, you're nuts, you know. She says, no, I have this vision, and I see things, and he's laying out in a field or a swamp. It's real marshy, she said, and I could see he has something around his neck, like a rope or a chain, and that he's shot. And I didn't know what to make of it.
And he said, how do I know he's dead? I said, well, he's standing right next to you.
I thought at first she was joking. And then I could see the sincerity in her face that she wasn't joking. She believed what she was telling me. And it's bizarre, and it makes it difficult because you can't use apparitions or visions as testimony in any court of law as the laws as we know it. So to vow or to affirm that something is true based on a vision, the courts will not recognize it. So basically it becomes at that point just a piece of information to guide the investigator, more of a tool than anything.
Detective Smith decides he has to pass on the information because of Mary Ellen's credibility.
It's not like some transient that just comes walking in off the street and says, hey, I had a vision. This is a business person who has a good reputation in the community and has had that business there for years.
Detective Smith meets with the Sharpsville police, the neighboring police force with jurisdiction over the case.
I remember saying to him, I don't think I'm crazy. I'm not drinking. I'm not smoking anything, but Mary claims she had a vision, and the person you're looking for is deceased, and he was murdered. I remember the officer kind of looked at me like, yeah, you're right, I do think you're crazy. But he took the information down.
Skeptical, the Sharpsville police check out Detective Smith's information. An officer visits Mary Ellen, who says Daryl is telling her what to say.
Well, yes, I said he's dead. And that seemed to be what I kept saying over and over. Daryl wanted him to know where he had been shot, and I told him I was feeling everything that he was feeling. And I felt the bullet.
Despite Mary Ellen's clues, police are still not convinced this is anything more than a husband who's run off.
He was such a great father. He loved his kids so much. Playing football with his son and helping his daughter learn how to ride her bike.
It seemed as if nobody wanted to do anything about finding this young man.
It was a very frustrating time because I wanted answers so desperately.
Mary Ellen felt Daryl was begging her not to give up.
Please tell them that I'm dead. Please tell them they need to be looking for me.
A father of two just disappears one night in a small Pennsylvania town. Daryl Cozart's family feels something is wrong and starts searching for him. From the moment psychic Mary Ellen Rodriguez first hears about the case, she says she's had Daryl as a constant companion.
Every morning when I crossed the bridge into Pennsylvania, he would tip my mirror down, and his eyes would be looking back at me in the mirror. And I would say, "Good morning, Daryl." And that would begin our day.
Mary Ellen believes he's trying to tell her what happened, but she can't always make sense of the clues.
He's screaming it in my ear. "It's Fickle, it's Fickle."
She kept pacing back and forth and just, what do you mean, fickle? What's so fickle? Who's being fickle?
Daryl has now been missing for more than 72 hours. The police decide to investigate his disappearance and question people who work with him to see if they can get a lead.
There were really no signs that there was any foul play because everybody they spoke to liked Daryl, and he was a likable person, and there was really no suspects as far as he didn't have any enemies.
They do find one person who may have some information about that night.
They had interviewed co-workers of his, and one woman was focused in on as being one of the last people to see Daryl.
But police have no reason to suspect her. Jeanette Cozart knows Daryl's co-worker, but only by her first name, Cindy or Cynthia.
When I walked into the restaurant where he had worked, Cindy was there. She asked me what I was doing there, and I says, "I'm looking for Daryl. Have you seen Daryl?" "Well, no, I saw him last night. He worked here last night, and he took me home, but that's the last time I saw him." I'm like, "Okay." And then she hugged me and told me that she was sure everything was going to be all right. He'll turn up.
That's not what Mary Ellen is telling Jeanette. She believes Daryl's been shot, but she can also feel that he's been hung. It's like she is experiencing what happened to Daryl.
I felt like I was choking, and I wanted to pull this away from my throat, so I felt that there was a rope around my neck. My forehead would itch. I start scratching my forehead, and I feel like I'm adjusting a bandana on my forehead. So I began to realize that at the moment that he was murdered, he was actually wearing a bandana.
It wasn't just an itchy forehead. Mary Ellen says Daryl tried to get her attention in other ways.
He would start banging on my walls. My walls would start banging, and my phone would start ringing. Again, trying to get my attention to do something. "Come on, you got to do something. You have to do something. You have to call them, tell them," and I did.
Driven by Daryl's desperation to be found and her desire to help Jeanette, Mary Ellen goes out searching for clues night after night.
I truly went looking for the body because nobody believed me. And Jeanette was, her life was in too much turmoil with news media and trying to keep her children calm. I felt like a search party of one in my off time. And I would go out looking for him, hoping that he would take me to where his body was. I feel his excitement when I'm really close to where he may be. He gets excited, like, "This is it, this is it." And he'll say, "This is it, here, here, here."
Mary Ellen feels Daryl keeps bringing her back to one street.
That's where his body was. I felt that that's where it had happened, right there in that area. Daryl acknowledged that it was right around in here. He said to me, "It was right around in here. This is where they killed me. This is where they murdered me." He was very frustrated at the lack of enthusiasm that the police department had for finding him. I didn't know how else to help him except to go out looking for him.
She was determined, and I think Daryl was pushing her.
Finally, after days of searching, Mary Ellen gets a signal she believes is from Daryl.
I was out looking for a sign of where Daryl may be. I was talking with Daryl, and I said to Daryl, "Please help me to help you. Show me where you may be, or even in the area, show me." When I found the sneaker, it was pointed west towards the airport, and so that may have been a sign that he's either in this area or he's down that way, down west to the airport.
Mary Ellen was worried no one would believe her, so she doesn't tell police about the shoe, but she feels it may have been a sign after all. A week after his disappearance, police find Daryl Cozart's van near the airport. Inside the van, police discover evidence of Daryl's murder.
The van had blood. You went on the side doors, there was blood on the carpet.
There's only a couple ways you can get blood in there. And unfortunately, one is the person's deceased.
Mary Ellen has been telling the police Daryl's dead from the beginning.
So that became a validation for me. For Daryl, that was a sigh of relief that, see, now they know I'm dead.
It's now a murder investigation, and police are under pressure to find Daryl's body.
We didn't know exactly where he was killed or by who.
The last thing you want is the public to feel unsafe, like there's a killer on the loose somewhere, and am I next?
But to find the killer, the police need more evidence. Mary Ellen feels Daryl is trying to help by telling her where to find his body.
They showed me a picture. There was a calendar up on my wall. It was a bog area with high grass and the little fence. That's where his body was.
Mary Ellen knows Daryl is desperate to be found and feels him getting more and more agitated. She is shocked by what she says happened next.
I'm driving to church, and he grabs my steering wheel. He says, I want to go to the police department. I want them to know I want to be buried in a gray pinstripe suit. Finally, I had to strike a deal with him, and I said, okay, Daryl, I tell you what. I said, you let me go to church, and then afterwards, I will drive to the police department and we'll talk. And he conceded, and he let go of the steering wheel.
So after church, Mary Ellen pays a visit to the Sharpsville police to ask why they're not checking nearby bogs, like the picture she showed them on her calendar.
And I said, you've got a picture of where he's located. Can't you find that area? Can't you just search? Can't you go out and look? I know he's face up, and my forehead is still itchy, so he's still wearing the bandana.
The officer isn't convinced there's any merit to what she's saying.
He said, I don't have the manpower to do that, and that could be any place. Daryl was answering all the questions. And at that point, the police officer said to me, will you tell him that if he wants to wear that suit, we better find him soon.
Mary Ellen relays messages back and forth, and finally, one last bit of information from Daryl for the Sharpsville police.
And he said, tell him before Tuesday. Before Tuesday morning, they will find me.
Daryl Cozart has been missing now for over a week, and psychic Mary Ellen Rodriguez is convinced the police are on the verge of finding his body. Monday afternoon, all of Mary Ellen's predictions come true.
I could feel his excitement. My hands were trembling, I was shaking. He was very excited about they had found him.
Another break for the police. A passing truck driver on Highway 11 near the Pennsylvania-Ohio border spots a body wrapped in plastic, dumped by the road. Daryl is found by a bog, exactly as Mary Ellen had predicted.
A truck driver happened to come along down a road near a swamp and had spotted what he thought was a body laying out in this grassy area, called police, and police arrived and ended up being Daryl.
One of the most horrific things I've had to go through in my life. Losing Daryl this way, having him murdered, was hard. But telling our children was the hardest thing I have ever done.
It was 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock when they found his body, and he was really excited, and my phone rang, and I said, I know, you found him, didn't you? I already knew. And they did find him face up, and he was wearing a bandana.
He was found shot and had a rope around his neck. Almost exactly the way she said he would be.
Now do you believe me? And Daryl was saying the same thing. Now do you believe me?
There was things that she described that would make you believe or make you suspicious that she may have been there, because there was things that were not released to the press that were found at the crime scene that she described. Call it coincidence, call it phenomena. It's unexplained.
The evidence confirms what Mary Ellen has been telling the police. The rope didn't kill Daryl. He'd been shot 5 times at close range with a .44 caliber gun.
That Daryl died a very violent death.
I saw the whole thing. He showed it to me. He didn't know he was going to be killed. He didn't know that he was being set up to be murdered.
The discovery of Daryl's body leads to the police getting a tip. It's from a man who has information about someone who knew Daryl.
Originally, he wasn't suspicious. He just said that he asked them to move the furniture, and they went into the garage, and there was a van in there, and there was a large tarp rolled up sort of like a carpet. And he said when he asked them to move this, he can feel legs. And then that's when he says, "Is this an individual?"
Shockingly, the answer is yes, and the friend knows this person is dead. But he doesn't tell police until after the discovery of Daryl's body.
Just because of friendship, he just let it go. And then when it became public as to who the individual was, and he decided that he would go ahead and tell us basically what he did.
Mary Ellen has one unsolved clue, and it's about to make sense.
It's Fickle, it's Fickle, it's Fickle.
It turns out the name of the suspected killer is Frank Fickle. The tip is from a friend of his. A few days earlier, he'd helped Fickle move a body.
Kind of threw me for a loop, because this is one of the things Mary Ellen had told me that Daryl kept saying to her was Fickle. He keeps repeating Fickle, she was saying. I'm like, well, what's Fickle, you know? And you never think of it as a person's last name.
With a search warrant in hand, police comb the Fickle home looking for evidence.
And he'll say, this is it, here, here, here.
It's the same street Mary Ellen Rodriguez has been driving past looking for clues.
And it was quite apparent that he was shot in that basement.
The killer had tried to destroy evidence.
A couple walls you can see had just been painted. You can see the floor has been washed down, and you can see that they were using bleach, things such as that, and some of the material was still there, so you can tell it was just fresh.
But the killer hadn't been able to get rid of all of the evidence.
Searching the basement, I could see different fibers still clinging to the cobwebs. Then as I kept on examining the area, I can see, even though there's minute, you can see buds spatter in different locations on the furnace pipes. And in one place I seen up in the rafters, there was a fairly good-sized piece of scalp, too.
At the moment that he was murdered, he was actually wearing a bandana.
Mary Ellen was right. Daryl had been wearing a blue bandana when he was shot.
We found a bandana up in the upstairs or on the first level floor that had the bullet hole in. And it had one bullet hole in the same area of where he was shot.
Police interview Frank Fickle's estranged wife. It turns out police have already talked to her. She's Cynthia, who worked with Daryl and was one of the last to have seen him alive. She said Daryl arrived at the Fickle home around midnight. She invited him in and sent him to the basement to smoke. But she told police she had no idea Frank Fickle was waiting there to kill Daryl.
Fickle was a person who was very jealous and had made himself believe that his wife had been having an affair with Daryl.
He was supposed to go down a cellar to smoke some grass. And when he got down, the shooting took place in the basement.
Frank Fickle had used his body as target practice.
Frank Fickle is arrested on Wednesday, March 12, 1997, for murdering Daryl Cozart in a jealous rage.
I don't even know how to explain how you feel inside when you look face to face at the man that murdered your husband. And anger, frustration, just emptiness.
The arrest is just a week and a half after Daryl went missing. Frank Fickle is found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment.
Daryl didn't deserve to die. He deserved to be here to raise his children and to love his children. God put him here for a reason, and Frank had no right to take him out of God's picture. No right.
Mary Ellen's involvement maybe led investigators to dig a little deeper, to talk to a few more people, because early in the investigation, it was just a missing person. And generally, a missing person investigation doesn't entail bringing in detectives. Well, if Mary Ellen would approach me again with any information on a crime we were investigating, I certainly would talk with her, and I certainly would take the information and give a little more weight than I would have the first time.
I would not have been able to take that journey without Mary Ellen. Without her, I would have been extremely lost. And we may never have found out who did it.
And Daryl finally did get to wear his gray striped suit at his funeral. For that, Mary Ellen is grateful.
My life changed forever when I became divided between two worlds, the earth world and the spirit world.
January 2003, a psychic has a vision of a violent murder in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
I felt terrified.
She sees the killer's face.
He had black hair, he had brown eyes, he had a very round, full face.
But her description is ignored by the police. A serial killer is on the loose. More women could die if no one listens. In May 2002, Murray Pace, a 22-year-old graduate assistant at Louisiana State University, leaves work early to attend a friend's wedding. 2 hours later, her roommate returns to the apartment to find her brutally murdered. In the following weeks, 3 more women are attacked. The Baton Rouge police then announced that DNA evidence links Murray Pace's murder to that of 2 other women. They are now dealing with a vicious serial killer who might also be behind the savage rape and murder of a number of other women in the area since 1990. The town is gripped by fear.
It was panic. You had ladies asking for self-defense courses. You had a major sale in pepper spray. People were worried about their daughters.
To catch the killer, the Baton Rouge Police Department sets up a task force together with the FBI and other local forces. Detective McDavid with the Zachary Police suggests as prime suspect a local peeping Tom who's been causing trouble for years.
Evidently, we put so much pressure on him that he began moving into the Baton Rouge area.
Unfortunately, he doesn't match the serial killer profile used by the FBI.
The majority of the profiles that we were getting from the FBI at the time were generic. Pretty much a white male in his mid-30s that lives at home, lives with his mother, or a loner.
The Zachary suspect is ignored. The FBI have witnesses to back up their profile. One reports a white male driving a pickup truck with a naked female slumped on the passenger seat. She looked dead. It was near the Whiskey Bay exit on Interstate 10, close to where the body of another victim had been found. Another witness sees a suspicious-looking white man near where a woman had been killed while visiting her mother's grave. She'd been beaten to death. By December 2002, the serial killer has taken 2 more women. A white man is seen near one of the bodies. The task force starts taking DNA samples of thousands of white males.
They were taking DNA samples from people that they thought may have had some connection in the neighborhood where the homicides occurred, or people that drove a white truck, or males that were in a certain age bracket.
At the end of December, the task force released their first composite sketch of the killer. He's a 25 to 35-year-old white male, apparently physically strong and awkward with women. But 6 months later, they still have no suspect. Ann Williams, a forensics consultant and former lawyer, teaches a college course in forensic investigation. She's worked on a number of cold cases and wants to help out on this one.
I knew there was talk of a serial killer. And I decided to call Jeannie Borgen, who has worked some cases with me as a police psychic. And I had contacted Murray's mother, Ann Pace, and gotten Murray's birth information, which is what Jeannie needs to work on these cases as a psychic.
Murray's mother decides to join Ann's forensics class.
She wanted to be there for Murray. She said that she was there when Murray was born, and she couldn't be there when it mattered most, when Murray died.
Ann Williams called me, and she told me she had a woman in her class by the name of Ann Pace, and that she had lost a daughter and that she had been murdered. I had Murray's birth certificate name and birth date, and I used that as a method of psychometry. In other words, I'm touching and I'm examining the name, and then I get the vision. I sort of ask for the vision mentally.
Ann often has forensics experts call in and talk to students on the speakerphone about cases they've worked on. So she sets up a conference call with Jean in California.
Well, we're all here to talk to you, my class.
The first thing that I saw was a house. Very neat house, a neat manicured lawn, very peaceful. I had seen him on a street corner looking at the apartment building. She didn't know him, but she had seen him. So he was familiar to her, and she was not overwhelmed or frightened. He can be very personable. But suddenly he got very violent, and he attacked. This girl fought back. For every blow she got, she gave him one. But he had a knife. And it was a brutal fight. And I was stuck in the picture. I couldn't get out. I knew that the final moments that she had to die with something of the throat. And he did. He did cut her throat. I felt terrified. It was like Murray and I were one at that point. I had to sit there and watch her die. It was really hard. As it ended, he straightened up and he looked at me. And it was like I was looking eye to eye with him. I started shaking inside, and then I had little butterflies, and then he disappeared. When I looked at him, I thought he was probably about 5'10" to 6 feet. He was Afro-American. He had black hair, he had brown eyes, he had a very round, full face, and then he had this little goatee. He had a mustache, but then there was other times that I picked him up, he did not have a mustache.
Someone in the class asked her, well, what's he wearing, this Baton Rouge serial killer? She said, well, right now, she says, I'm seeing him in blue Dickies. And I said, well, what are dickies? I mean, I didn't even know. And the class laughed, and they said, those are work pants, you know.
With Murray's mother verifying the known details of the murder, the class are stunned by the realism of the psychic's vision. But Ann Williams is uneasy.
When Jean first described the serial killer as being a light-complected black man, I just thought she was off. I didn't believe it. Because, you know, statistically, he would be a white man, and that's what they said they were looking for.
Can Ann's investigation be of any help to the task force if Jeannie's vision is so off on such a key point? January 2003. Baton Rouge is being terrorized by a serial killer. A task force is set up to catch him. They believe he's a white man and take DNA samples of over 2,000 men. But 6 months later, they still have no suspect. Forensics consultant Ann Williams wants to help. She involves her friend, psychic Jeannie Borgen, who has a stark vision of the murder of one of the killer's victims. But in her vision, the killer is a light-skinned African-American. Ann thinks she's wrong.
Ann was right. You don't positively make a statement about a suspect until you're absolutely certain.
But Ann has worked with Jeannie before, and the psychic's accurate description of the murder persuades her not to give up too easily. Over the following months, Jeannie has constant visions of the killer.
I was tuning in on him every night. He was in the car a lot.
She sees him at Whiskey Bay off Interstate 10, where the bodies of 2 earlier victims were found. Jeannie is convinced there are more. With her friend, Chip Bowman, Ann Williams tries to find the places Jeannie sees in her visions. If they find another body, it might lead them to the killer. They photograph likely locations and send her the pictures.
Well, I think probably if we take pictures anywhere around here, it'll be helpful to Jeannie, because who knows where he would have dumped somebody. Then we could go back the opposite end, where Pam Kennemore's body was found, to that north area, that wooded area that Jeannie's interested in, and take some shots of that.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Well, it's very, very hard because I have to have a fix. I have to see a certain tree, or I have to see something that looks like what I'm seeing.
Jeannie tries to guide them through the landscapes of her visions.
I can't believe this, Jeannie. We're actually seeing what you're telling us.
Listen, you need to go to your right. There's going to be a big line of trees there. Yeah, all right, now wait a minute. When he walked into the line of trees, there was like a culvert there and he tripped.
There is a dip in the ground, just like you said. I cannot believe this.
But finding a body in this vast wilderness requires a massive search, and time is running out. Jeannie begins to sense the killer's moods.
He really did not like women, especially women who were mentally above him, or he felt superior to him.
These women were basically the same. They were professional women. I mean, we had 2 homicides in Zachary, which is in the parish, that were fairly consistent with what was happening in Baton Rouge.
It was almost a hate sexual type of a situation.
Jeannie senses the killer is ready to strike again.
The energy had been building in him as he watched the person for maybe weeks.
He did a lot of surveillance, what we can tell, on these victims' houses. He knew their movements, knew when they come outside, he knew who was at the house.
And then when it got powerful in the body, he went for it. I knew that this was a man who had to kill.
As the killer's bloodlust becomes stronger, Jeannie has a terrible vision.
I thought I had another victim. And then suddenly I realized she's alive. And it was like, oh my God, she's alive. And she's gonna be one of the future victims. And then at that point, I thought, but where is she? Where do I go from here?
The killer is already stalking his next victim. As Jeannie tries desperately to see where the attack might happen, the landscape of her visions becomes more recognizable.
He stood one night looking out at the water. and I saw these beautiful white birds fly over the water. That was I think that was at the foot of Stanford Avenue.
2 of the killer's victims had lived on Stanford Avenue. Does his new victim also live here? With time running out, Anne and Chip scour the area.
The next thing I got was a house. It was a green house. It had 2 trees on both sides, like this, like a frame, and it had bushes in front. That had to be where she lived. But I couldn't quite figure out, I couldn't get anything that would give me a sign as to where it was at.
And then finally a breakthrough. Anne and Chip locate one of Jeannie's visions.
He went to this place that was sort of a little restaurant with a big television. When I got the picture of this little restaurant, it wasn't much, but I was overjoyed that they had found it, because I thought that he'd probably frequent that a lot.
But tragically, they are too late. On March 13, 2003, the body of 26-year-old Carrie Yoder is found at Whiskey Bay. Once again, the killer had been careful not to leave any fingerprints.
But he did leave one important evidence on the body. That was his DNA, which is similar to a fingerprint.
DNA evidence shows she's a victim of the same man who killed Murray Pace. The man the task force are convinced is white, but who appears in Jeannie's visions as a light-skinned African-American.
But as far as the description of this light-complected black man, I just didn't buy that. He's white. She's wrong.
Then, some days later, while talking to Murray's old roommate, Anne makes an extraordinary discovery.
She told me about some neighbors of Murray's who had seen a suspicious man standing across the street staring at Murray's townhouse the morning she was murdered. They each went to the police that day and gave their description. None of them knew the other had seen him, but the police weren't interested. They had a profile they were working from that this is a white man. So they just totally ignored credible witnesses that day.
So the neighbors posted their testimonies on a well-known website.
Said that this guy was a light-complected black man wearing blue Dickies with a wannabe goatee. And I said, you gotta be kidding. I was trying to figure out, well, the police won't come do a sketch, so what can I do? So I wound up ordering some software that the police use.
Together with Karen Savoy, one of Murray's neighbors, Anne puts together a composite sketch of the man they saw watching Murray's house the day she was murdered.
I don't see anything there. Could we, go down? Let's try 812.
Wanna try it?
No, I don't think so. And rounded on the.
So it needs flatter?
Yes.
Okay.
But
we'll keep going.
Not as broad as the one that I liked. I think it was 836.
What about that one?
Jeannie confirms this is the man she saw in her visions. Anne sends it to the task force.
Anne and I were talking constantly about what we could do to get the police to recognize that this was a black man, not a white man. But they just didn't seem to look at it as far as we knew.
Once we got these sketches and everything, I drafted a letter, and I put their verbal description of this guy, because that's the most important thing, and how to reach these witnesses, and that they really would like to speak with law enforcement and hopefully do a professional sketch. And I sent that, I overnighted it to Governor Foster, and then to the task force, and I didn't get any response from them.
But when she tried to produce the sketch to the task force, they turned it down. They didn't want to hear about it. It was a white male they were looking for.
Although the police agree that the witnesses all saw the same man, Anne is not allowed to release the sketch.
He said, well, you know, we already have a sketch. We don't want another sketch out there. You're not a professional sketch artist. I said, well, I know. I said, but who did your other sketch? You know, from Lafayette. He said, well, that was a professional sketch artist. I said, well, that sketch doesn't look like anybody on this planet.
A month later, in April 2003, police in nearby Zachary received fresh complaints about a peeping Tom in a neighborhood where 2 women were previously raped and murdered.
The neighbor across the street here called in and stated that a black male was standing at this window right here, peeping into this window. The lady that lived here was a school teacher. She was a single mom who had 1 child here. We saw several footprints here at the windowsill. We followed these prints and they went around the corner right here and went down the fence line right here and took off in the neighborhood.
Zachary police think it's the same peeping Tom who some years earlier they suspected of a vicious attack on 2 teenagers with a machete at the local cemetery.
2 teenagers were parking in the graveyard here. It was a very stormy night, a lot of lightning going on. One of our officers came down the road right here and saw the dome light on in the car, knowing that nobody's supposed to be in the graveyard at that time of night. He come in here and stopped and got his flashlight out and checked and saw 2 teenagers in there covered in blood. And they began screaming. He called for help, stated a black male had came to them and began cutting them up with a big hack blade. He saw the police officer drive up. He reached back in the car and took a set of keys and fled the scene.
Working with the victims, police did a sketch of the attacker. It looks just like the peeping Tom. His name is Todd Lee. They suggested him to the task force, but they aren't interested in a black peeping Tom. They believe the serial killer is white. If they won't listen to colleagues, reliable witnesses, or even an experienced psychic, how many more women will die before the killer is caught? A savage serial killer is preying on the town of Baton Rouge. The police are hunting a white man, but psychic Jeannie Borgen believes he's African American. And while Ann Williams and photographer Chip Bowman try to find the places she sees him in, the killer strikes again. Meanwhile, police in nearby Zachary think the killer could be a black peeping Tom who's been plaguing their town for years. With fresh complaints of the peeping Tom in their area, Zachary police now reopened the file of their main suspect, Todd Lee. Apart from his peeping Tom offenses, Lee has also been in jail for various burglaries and for beating his girlfriend.
We worked out a timeline and we saw where he had a job, when he didn't have a job.
The timeline showed them something startling.
When he was in prison, we didn't have no murders. When he was out, we began having problems in the area.
Meanwhile, in Baton Rouge, the task force get lucky. There were witnesses to the abduction of Carrie Yoder. Police now release a second sketch of the serial killer and announced that he could in fact be of any race, not necessarily white. This is sweet music to McDavid's ears.
In the back of your mind, you want to go out and say, I told you so.
Was a likeness of a black male that was also similar to a sketch that was produced by Ann Williams.
Now psychic Jeannie Borgen has a terrifying premonition. The killer is about to strike again.
At this point, I knew he would kill if he had the chance.
But the clues are too vague. Ann Williams feels helpless to prevent it.
She says, well, I'm getting a woman missing in Alabama, and she said she's a pretty brunette. And I said, well, I don't know. I haven't heard anything about a woman in Alabama.
Then, Melinda McGee disappears from her home in Mobile, Alabama. Her body is never found. Finally, in May 2003, McDavid gets a court order to take a DNA swab from Todd Lee.
My partner, Trevor Hannah, and me drove up there and we found him out in the yard. He saw me get out the vehicle and began getting upset and told them to tell me to leave. He knew, that I was after him. In 1998, I interviewed Lee in the Mayberry murder. And after interviewing him, I looked him in his face, because he was real cocky. And I told him, so I know what you did, I'm gonna get you one day.
The sample is sent to the crime lab to be analyzed. Lee now takes his 2 children out of school and leaves town. Some days later, the analyst at the DNA lab makes the discovery that seals Lee's fate. His DNA matches that of the serial killer. McDavid is called in to see the task force.
I walked in, everybody just, their eyes were on me. And I kind of glanced back and looked around, and I'm not for sure who said it. They come up to me and said, y'all just solved the serial killer. Y'all's DNA swab matched the serial killer. Oh, I was elated. I was excited. I mean, tears came to my eyes.
The task force now officially identify the serial killer. It's Derek Todd Lee. Police track Lee to a cheap motel in Atlanta. The officers just miss him as they arrive. Following a tip-off, they finally arrest him outside a tire store.
The minute I heard his name, it was like, that's him. They got him. It was just pure elation.
On the 12th of October, 2004, a jury takes just 80 minutes to find Derek Todd Lee guilty of the first-degree murder of Charlotte Murray Pace. He's also indicted for the murders of 6 other women.
This is the kind of case, these serial killings, where a psychic can be very helpful because you don't have a DNA database. And oftentimes, people are surprised to learn many police agencies are not well trained or well equipped to deal with these kinds of stranger killings.
This case was very difficult because it was like working on 15 cases rather than just one case. I got frustrated, so frustrated that I couldn't get on top of him fast enough to catch him.
It was a relief off my shoulders because since 1992 we've been battling these murders, and I made a commitment to myself before I retired I was going to solve these murders.
I would hope that the sketch we did maybe helped convince them that Derek Todd Lee was the man they were after. I hope so.
Lee is given the death penalty and is awaiting execution at Angola prison.
It was a victory for law enforcement. It was a victory for our city. In the town of Zachary, you know, people still leave their doors unlocked, you know, and not looking over their shoulders. And now they can still do that. They can go out and walk freely and not worry about that.
Drug trafficking as a career is fraught with occupational hazards, most notably violence, which in extreme cases can cause death. So when a father learns his wayward son has gone missing, he hopes for the best, but suspects the worst. And when the police can't find him, the father enlists the help of not 1, but 2 psychics.
Now I got a sense right away that he was gone.
You're not looking for a living human being anymore. You're looking for a body, and a body can be anyone.
But can anyone be absolutely certain, the police or the psychics, if the missing man is dead or alive? Back in 1994, Lawrence Embro was a businessman.
He was, for all intents and purposes, an upstanding citizen, a member of the community. He had a fiance. His fiance and he had were to be married in 3 or 4 weeks. So he had all the characteristics of a normal citizen.
Normal, except his business was dealing drugs. And apart from having a street name, Shaba, Lawrence Embro wasn't your stereotypical supplier.
The number one anomaly in this whole situation was that it didn't appear as though he actually used drugs or had any involvement in drugs. His lifestyle didn't depict that. His family relationships didn't depict that. It appeared as though his involvement was just that of business.
Apparently, Embro's plan was to make enough money to retire from the drug business, go straight, and start a new life with his fiancée in Dallas. But the best laid plans of mice and men.
Oklahoma City 911. Okay, and what's your name, ma'am? If you could just calm down, we've got officers on their way to help you out.
The call was from a woman who had been terrorized by thugs breaking into her home. The woman was Lawrence Embro's mother-in-law-to-be.
There were 3 people in the residence when the incident occurred. There was a woman, she's about 45 years old, and there were 2 children, 9.5 or 10 years old, where the door burst open, and these 2 individuals, both of them with weapons, immediately began striking her, forcing her to the ground, covering her face, loud abusive threats, threatening to kill her, dragging her and telling her, you know, don't look at me, don't look at me, forcing her to the back of the residence where the children were found. At the same time, we're asking, you know, where's Shaba's money? Where's Shaba keep his property, his stuff? Of course, they were dumbfounded by the request. They didn't know what to think, and of course the kids were terrified, and the mother or the woman was cooperative. They all were. As this continued, for whatever reason, and it appears to be just an opportunistic thing, one of the suspects took the woman to a different room and continued searching, and then at one point sexually assaulted her.
Apart from $40 taken from a piggy bank, the assailants leave empty-handed. When Evans interviews the victims, it becomes apparent that the men were looking for Lawrence Embro, but Embro is nowhere to be found. The fact that he doesn't return phone calls immediately raises suspicion.
Had it not been for the fact that the home invasion also included reference to him, there would have been some resistance to taking that kind of complaint or that kind of concern seriously. But given the fact that there was a reference made to him during the home invasion, and that coincided exactly with the time that you know they lost contact with him, it was obvious that they were related.
But in this case, because of the timing of Embro's sudden disappearance and the ransacking of his mother-in-law's home, Evans felt that there was an obvious connection. He called Embro's father and advised him to file a missing persons report with the Midwest City Police Department, the jurisdiction where Embro lived. Now there are 2 official police investigations. While Dan Evans of the Oklahoma City Police Department handles the home invasion, the missing persons case is assigned to Midwest City Detective Pam Gray. One of the first solid leads is the discovery of Embro's car, clean as the day it rolled off the assembly line.
A normal car is going to have prints unless somebody didn't want prints there, in which case that's a red flag. Everything indicated to me something had happened to Lawrence Embro, that he had been killed.
About a month into the investigation, Detective Gray received a phone call from Lawrence Embro's father.
He came to accept the fact that his son was probably dead, but he wanted the body. He wanted to be able to bury his son.
The father was so desperate to recover his son's body that he contacted a local psychic and wanted Gray to meet with her.
I said I would be willing to do anything, because we kind of reached a stalemate, a standstill as far as the investigation. A lot of people were talking to the detective in Oklahoma City, and their indication to me was they had been advised not to talk to anybody else, including me. Oklahoma City was working one aspect. I was working the missing person on Lawrence Embro. It's really kind of tough when you run into a stone wall.
Gray, who'd never worked with a psychic before, was in for a rude awakening from her colleagues.
Well, there was a lot of laughter, and I would constantly hear there was no reason for any comments to be made because they would all be humming the theme song to the Twilight Zone. Way out there, Earth calling Sky King, you know. Just rude comments, but you get used to it.
Unperturbed, Detective Gray went and met with psychic Nita Lee.
When I went to the appointment with Nita Lee, her first response to me was, "He's dead." I felt at that point that he was dead.
I said, there's 3 guys that did it, and one of them seemed to be smaller than the other 2.
Gray was really hoping for Nita to pinpoint a location.
And I said, he's northeast of Oklahoma City. There's an old tin barn where he is. I said, he can hear the train as it goes by. So see, his spirit was very much there with him.
A train, an old tin barn, and northeast of the city, not exactly GPS accuracy.
We're talking a lot of farmland, a lot of pasture land, a lot of ranches. The scope that Nita Lee gave me would have been impossible to walk it.
But Nita did give one other clue. She said the body was not buried. If this was true, it was in practical terms a plus.
We would probably have a better chance of locating the body than if it was buried. Because if it was closer to town, somebody would start smelling it. If it's out in the field, that possibility isn't going to exist. But hopefully somebody who owns some land or wherever would come across the body.
Psychic Nita Lee was able to at least narrow down the search area to the northeast of Oklahoma City. Will a second psychic's clues lead Detective Pam Gray to the exact location and bring a sense of closure to Lawrence Embro's grief-stricken family? August 1994. It's been 3 months since Lawrence Embro went missing. When psychic Nita Lee's predictions don't locate what everyone assumes to be a missing body, the father brings in another psychic, Dr. Sally Heading.
My rule is that if I'm going to take a crime case, I have to work with the law enforcement agency. Sometimes, number 1's for my protection, and number 2 is sometimes there are things that I don't think the family needs to know. They're already in pain.
Sally never demands payment for her services, and with good reason.
Because you're not going to always see everything. You're not going to be able to read everyone or pick up on everything. And so if you have that kind of pressure on you, wouldn't there be the fear that you'd start making up shenanigans? You know, well, I really need that money and the mortgage overdue, so maybe this time I'll just fudge a little. So when your livelihood is not contingent on it, then you aren't under that pressure. And you could say, you know what, honey, I can't help you. I don't see a thing around you. It's an absolute blank. Or you can go ahead and do a reading and say, yes, I'm getting this, this, and this. And the same thing for the law work, because all of that is pro bono. I charge nothing. And I tell them my accuracy rate has been tested to be about 80%. If I knew when I was wrong, I would never be wrong. I don't have a clue. Not a clue.
Sally, who doesn't like to travel, works from the comfort of her home in California.
I didn't think right off the bat that he was alive.
It was a confirmation of what I already felt, what Mr. Embro had come to feel, what Nita Lee had said, and now Sally Heading was saying.
I had the sense, because there was money involved, that it was about selling drugs, and that there was a lot of anger around this money, that it was a deal that had gone wrong.
Once again, Sally and Detective Gray were on the same track.
Well, my thought was he hadn't got out of the drug culture, that either a drug deal had went bad, or he was involved in something else that somebody wanted to get rid of him.
One of the things I saw was a blue blanket. I knew they had not buried him. I saw a blue blanket over him.
In sync with Nita, the man is not buried. The blue blanket, a new and pretty specific clue.
I kept being shown flashing a metal sign that said Hereford's on it. And I had the sense of prized Herefords. I also saw a barbed wire fence. I knew there was a gravel road. I could hear it. And I also knew that on the road going north, that there were poles all along the side of the road, telephone poles.
Sally is describing the rural area surrounding Oklahoma City exactly as Nita did.
I got a strong sense that people came up from Los Angeles, the 3 people, to meet another man. I had the sense that 3 were African American, and the 4th man was mixed, and that the 3 men were brought up to do Lawrence Monroe harm.
Now Sally is getting all these visions while sitting in her home in California, half a continent away from the crime scene, and the only connection with Detective Pam Gray is the other end of a telephone line.
Sometimes I'll see like flashes of images. Sometimes I'll feel as if I'm right there going through it, as if that person has walked through me or entered me and I'm walking along with them, or that they're holding my hand and showing me something. And sometimes it's not like hearing voices, it's from within. It's not like someone's whispering in your ear. Sometimes you'll hear a noise that might be connected with a crime scene or something.
I have to confess, I started imitating my fellow detectives humming the theme song of Twilight Zone. You know, I've got this phone call and I've got this woman telling me these things. And she's over 1,000 miles away. Yeah, right, you know.
I knew this was a woman who hadn't believed in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy for many, many years, and I think I was on that list, you know, of people to be debunked.
But I tended to believe, or at least have an open mind, because some of what she had told me was consistent with what Nita Lee had told me. But it was strange to me how people 1,500 miles away from each other were consistent in what they were saying.
You know, I really believe that it's the exceptional police officer who will set their own belief system aside and do whatever it takes to solve that case. And I think she has that kind of intelligence and insight.
Sally's final prediction was astonishing.
The body is going to be found by deer hunters. It's going to be happenstance that they come upon this body, and there will be 2 of them.
Unfortunately, the notion of 2 hunters finding the body doesn't actually define or even narrow down a time frame. In Oklahoma, there's always some unsuspecting creature in season. Deer, dove, crow, rabbit, wild turkey, pheasant, quail, even squirrels are on the hit list. Detective Gray drives the general area northeast of the city, hoping Sally's clues will lead her to the body of Lawrence Embro. But even she admits it's a long shot.
You would have to have literally millions of people just walking side by side to cover every square inch. It's like the needle in a haystack. Hopefully you will see something, but the possibility of that are slim and none.
Sure enough, the search proves to be a waste of time. All the clues provided by both psychics yield nothing. But what if Sally Heading came to Oklahoma? Perhaps she could pick up more information from being in the general vicinity of the crime. But there is one small snag.
I really didn't want to fly here. No offense to lovely Oklahoma, but I didn't need to. I read energy. I don't need to be someplace else. Energy is eternal. It's the same every place. I don't have to be right there to pick up on the energy. So I didn't feel I had to fly in. I knew I would not be the one that would, oh, here he is, I got him.
Despite this, she reluctantly makes the journey to Oklahoma City.
I came in for the family. There's nothing anyone can do that feels like enough. And so that was the energy that brought me here, to help the family. Did I feel that they were being any difference? No.
Pam Gray, the detective charged with finding the missing Embro, is out of town the day Sally arrives. Detective Larry Beaver, who has never worked with a psychic before, is assigned to escort Sally around the city.
I was a little bit apprehensive, to say the least, but I was a little excited also. Having an opportunity to work with someone outside the field of law enforcement seemed like it was going to be, like I said, exciting to me.
I said, you know, once we get into Midwest City, I'll take over. I'll just tell you where to go, you know. Fortunately, we didn't end up in Cucamonga.
Beaver takes Sally to a known crack house on the outskirts of the city. The rumor on the street was that this is where Embro may have met his end. 2 years before Embro went missing, a mass murder occurred here. 5 women were stripped and stabbed to death. Sally picks up on the bad vibrations.
Wow.
Can't imagine everything that's happened here.
A lot of bad things. A lot of bad things.
While Sally was convinced this was not the location, for the first time she got a sense that Lawrence Embro was executed.
I had the sense of him going to there were stairs. I'm not sure now if it was upstairs or downstairs, but going into a building. He walked in, there were other men in there. Some of them he didn't know. There was the energy of hostility. He was anxious. I could feel that sense of anxiety, discomfort. You know, I don't want to be here. Like God, I'm outnumbered. Then I had this sense of gray around his face or neck. I wasn't sure if it was duct tape or if it was rope. I wasn't sure if they put him in a trunk or a back seat. I knew that they had not driven more than 20 minutes.
The cop and the psychic continued to search the area, keeping roughly within a 20-minute radius from the city. For Sally, the sense of being in the right place is almost tangible.
You know, ever since we pulled up here, I've had an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. And my definition of déjà vu is that you're on path, you're right where you're supposed to be, doing what you're supposed to be doing, that everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be, and that's the feeling I have right now.
With everything. As Sally had predicted, the visit to Oklahoma didn't produce a body.
Well, when we wrapped things up at the last location, I felt a little skeptical at that at the time, not knowing Sally very well and not knowing what to expect. Okay, fine, yes, we didn't find the body, but we found all these signs and symbols and things that you had predicted we would find, and you're telling me now that you believe that, you know, when hunting season starts that the body will be found. I will just leave it at faith and see what happens.
What Sally had done to move the case forward was to narrow down the area where she thought the body might be found.
One person says something, you can kind of blow it off. 2 people say something, and where there were consistencies with what Sally Heading and Nita Lee, the prior psychic, had said, I was beginning to believe.
Detective Pam Gray's newfound faith drove her to action.
I contacted Lincoln County Sheriff's Office, and 2 deputies went out and rode this 450 acres of the land near where she had indicated his body was nearby.
The deputies find nothing. In November 1994, 2 men are out hunting quail. It's 30 days since psychic Sally Heading was wandering around these parts. It's also the last day of quail hunting season. The unsuspecting hunters make a horrifying discovery. It turns out to be the remains of Lawrence Embro, exactly as psychic Sally Heading predicted.
The body's going to be found by deer hunters.
And I said he's northeast of Oklahoma City, I
One of the
think.
things I saw was a blue blanket. I knew they had
There's an
not
old tin
buried
barn where he is, and it has great
flashing a metal sign that said Hereford's on it.
I said, he can hear the train as it goes by, and he could.
I also saw a barbed wire fence. I knew there was a gravel road. I could hear it.
Every single clue provided by both psychics, Sally Heading and Nita Lee, turned out to be right on target. All the indicators were in the vicinity of where the body was found. Detective Pam Gray was blown away.
There wasn't any more teasing. There wasn't any more humming of the Twilight Zone. However, nobody wanted to come right out and say, hey, psychics are great, psychics are wonderful, you know, this is the answer.
With the discovery of Embro's body, police were now dealing with a homicide. After an exhaustive investigation, detectives were able to piece together what had happened.
The story was Mr. Embro gave approximately somewhere between $20,000 and $60,000 to an associate of his to go to California to pick up a load of cocaine. He reportedly bought a Lexus, went out to clubs, frequented ladies or women, and squandered all the money. To most dope dealers, they have to, or they're going to demand respect, because if they don't have it, they're not going to be able to do their work. If you don't respect them, you're not going to pay them. And a lot of dope dealers will front you dope. In other words, they'll give you the dope without the money on your word that you're going to pay them back. They only do that if they know you or if they respect you as someone in the business. If you don't have any respect on the street, whether you're a dope dealer, you're a cop, you're a doctor, or whatever, you're not going to get very far. There's no honor among thieves, but they do value respect very highly. They don't always earn it, but they value it.
The gentleman with the new Lexus was Steve Gray. Embro, who naturally wanted his money back, put the squeeze on Gray. Gray called his gang member friends in LA, including a man by the name of Isaac Johnson. According to Johnson, Gray wanted Embro off his case, to do what it takes to scare him into backing off. As payment, they keep whatever money they find. However, before they get a chance to confront him, Embro makes a surprise visit to Steve Gray's girlfriend's apartment. Little does he know, the gang from LA are inside.
Lawrence comes to the door, opens up his jacket, shows his gun, says he wants his money or he wants him. So Steve invites him inside, says, I've got some money, let me pay you something, I'll get you the rest later. As soon as he walks in the door, Isaac Johnson tells us that he punches him in the face and Lawrence Embro goes down. They then commence to beating him with their weapons and with their hands and feet until they subdue him.
Lawrence Embro died from his wounds. The gang wrapped his head with duct tape, placed him in a blanket, and dumped him on the outskirts of town. The duct tape was exactly as Psychic Sally Heading described. The blanket, down to the color blue, was exactly as she described. Even Sally can't fully explain it.
I wish I could tell you how I know these things. How did I know it was a blue blanket? You know, I mean, there are a lot of colors to pick from there. Is it a lucky guess? Do you know there are times I've really wondered that seriously? Could these be lucky guesses? Am I just doing, you know, randomly da-da-da-da-da? But it comes so quickly and so strongly, I don't believe so. The only way that I can come up with an explanation is that Lawrence was showing me where he was.
All the gang members were charged and found guilty in the murder of Lawrence Embro. Lawrence Embro was 29 when he was murdered. He had planned on going straight, getting married, and moving to Dallas. Unlike many in his trade, he wasn't a drug user. Apparently, he was simply tempted by the lure of making a quick buck, a temptation that cost him his life. May 1995. A woman disappears in Northern California. No one can find her. Then a psychic has a terrible vision.
I could feel her energy, absolutely frantic with fear. She knew she was going to be murdered.
For weeks, they searched, but they can't find her.
She's in a ditch, water not far away.
Can the psychic lead police to her body so they can convict her cold-blooded killer? May 24th, 1995. The rural town of Dixon, Northern California. Martin Reese, a police officer from the nearby town of Davis, searches the streets for his ex-sister-in-law, Rosa Talamantes. A single mother of 7, Rosa went out for a beer the night before and didn't return home. With children to feed and get ready for school, this is not like her. She's a responsible mother. Her family are anxious.
My thought at that point was that she may have taken off, who knows, to spend the night somewhere and just didn't bother to tell the children, but somehow in the back of my mind it didn't seem right.
To make matters worse, the night before, Rosa's eldest daughter, Elisa, had a terrifying premonition.
Around midnight, something in my stomach just pulled really hard, and I had a bad pain in my stomach, so the next morning, when I got to the house and found the kids alone, I asked them where my mother had went, and they said she had went to the store with Jose and never came back.
Jose Aniques, Rosa's boyfriend, is an immigrant farm laborer. Their relationship is volatile. He helps feed her children, but he's also jealously possessive, and their arguments often flare into violence. Elisa goes straight out to the work camp where Jose lives. Maybe her mother had stayed the night with him, but neither of them are there. Frantic, Elisa goes to the police to report her mother missing.
When I got that pain in my stomach, I knew that she was dead. She wouldn't have stayed out that long with her kids at home. She'd never left them alone. Deep down inside, I knew she was really dead.
But without proof that her mother is dead, the police tell Elisa they must wait 24 hours before they can file a missing persons report. Detective Sergeant Elaine Perry was friendly with Rosa.
She and we developed a rapport and a good just communication between us. One day in passing, she had indicated to me that she was in a relationship, but the individual had a bad temper. And she had told him she didn't want to see him any longer. And she had been seeing another gentleman that had also lived here in town.
Rosa had already told Jose that she was going to leave him. And he had threatened her that if she left him, he would kill her.
My fear was that he may have beat her up and just left her abandoned somewhere.
After combing the streets without finding her, Martin offers his services to the Dixon police. As a relative of Rosa's and a fellow police officer, he wants to do all he can to help. Feeling increasingly desperate, Elisa goes back out to look for her mother's boyfriend, Jose. And this time, she finds him, though she soon wishes she hadn't.
I asked him, where was my mother? And he said he had no idea where she was. That's when I told him that I had spoke with the police in town, if he could please follow me into town because they wanted to speak with him. So he followed me, and halfway down the road, he flashed the lights at me and told me to pull over. So I pulled over, and I could tell he was walking up to my vehicle, very antsy, like he wanted to strangle me or do something to me. But he noticed I had my little brother with me, so he just told me, just be a minute, I'm gonna have to return back to the camp, I forgot something. And I said, okay, because I didn't want to frustrate him more, so he went back and I drove into town.
Elisa rushes to the police station to tell them she's found Jose. They must catch him quick before he escapes. Jose had left the camp the night before, but he came back at dawn drunk.
It appears that he did return to the field because he wanted to get a paycheck. He made a statement to the coworker about sending a person to heaven.
Police arrest Jose as he's about to leave the camp. Being the last person to see Rosa, he's a prime suspect. They hold him on an outstanding drunk driving offense, which gives them time to find out what happened to Rosa. Martin helps Elaine interview Jose. He's cold and indifferent and claims he knows nothing of Rosa's disappearance.
His events were that they had bought some alcohol and they had been drinking and that they had taken a drive, and after that he brought her back and he has no idea where she went after that.
But Rosa's children have already told police that he didn't bring her back that evening. In Jose's car, police find a pair of Rosa's earrings, which apparently she never removed. They also find a shirt stained with blood, which Jose claims came from a nosebleed. Meanwhile, Martin begins searching the fields around Jose's work camp. But with such a vast area to cover, it's a fruitless exercise. Days go by. Rosa's family are desperate. Then a colleague of Martin's suggests he make a phone call, which gives the investigation a whole new focus. Psychic Sally Heading is a doctor of psychology and parapsychology. She's also done a lot of crime work with the police.
I'm good at finding bodies. I don't have to be there. In fact, I prefer not being there. It's easier for me to just do it with remote viewing. When someone dies, they're still there. They're just no longer in body. If energy is continuous, then there's no reason for me to go someplace to see something. I can do it just right where I am.
The normally skeptical Sergeant Martin Reese is willing to give it a try.
Hello, Sally. This is Martin.
A lot of times, we may hamper ourselves by not considering every option available out there. And I have to remind myself, what is the focus here? Why am I going through this? Because I want to get resolution for the family, for the kids. So, why not?
She had a very strong feeling that this man was capable of taking her life. When Martin gave me the first phone call, I started getting a very strong sense of what had happened to this woman. In fact, as I talked with Martin, I knew that she was dead.
Martin is shocked. The psychic has confirmed the family's worst fears. But how will he prove who killed Rosa? Rosa Talamantes has disappeared. Her boyfriend, Jose, is the last person to have seen her, but he insists he doesn't know where she is. The police lock him up on a drunk driving charge while they investigate. But after a week of searching for her, they find nothing. Her family fear the worst. Martin Reese, an out-of-town police officer and relative of Rosa's, is helping the police to try to find her. He contacts psychic Dr. Sally Heading, who confirms their worst fears.
She'd been murdered by her boyfriend.
Rosa's children tell police that the fateful evening began when Jose took Rosa out to buy some beer. But this trip to the store wasn't like others.
What was unusual about this particular time was that she went without the kids, as she always had. One of the kids tied to her hand, and the smallest one stuck on her hip. When one of the kids offered to go with them, apparently he said he didn't want anybody to go with him, just the two of them to go to the store. And that's what was unusual.
Sally believes it was Rosa who made the children stay behind.
She knew she was going to be murdered. If she brought her children along, they would be too. If she didn't go with him, he would murder her there and take her children too. They'd all be gone.
Under repeated questioning, Jose starts to change his story.
Jose stated that they had gone out to the camp and that there was a verbal argument, and she got angry at him and had jumped out of his car, and that he turned his car around and went looking for her but was unable to locate her. So he at that point went back to the camp and went to sleep for the evening.
But Sally's vision shows a frighteningly different sequence of events.
He wanted power and control over this woman. He sensed he was losing her. She was a piece of property to him, and he wasn't ready to let go of her. And if he wasn't going to have her, then no one else would. He took her to where he works the land, because that's where he's comfortable. It's a place where he feels in control.
And once out in the fields, Jose gives vent to his violent jealousy. Sally experiences the harrowing last moments of Rosa's life.
I had the sense of pain around my neck, of not being able to breathe. I had the sense of something burning me on my neck. The killing blow was at the neck and the chest that she bled out. That she was in a ditch on the side of the road, curled up in the fetal position.
During the initial conversation, Sally told me that we needed to go back and search at the place where Jose lived.
I knew she wasn't terribly far away from the ranch. I believe I said she was within 2 to 5 miles, something like that. There was a great sense of urgency on this case because of the concern about him taking off, concern about flight down to Mexico, not being able to apprehend him.
Just over 2 weeks after Rosa's disappearance, a massive search is made of the area surrounding Jose's work camp.
They brought out the mounted police, the canine. They had dogs that specialize in searching for bodies. They had people up in the sky. Just all the volunteers came together and searched the area.
When you're getting into our rural areas, there's miles and miles of roadways and acreage and ditches, drain ditches and ditches in fields, and the ground being constantly worked up, and that somewhat makes a search more difficult.
But even after such a huge effort, there is no sign of Rosa.
We were disheartened by it because, of course, being small agencies in this county, it is difficult to get everyone together like that. And our hope, again, was to find Rosa. We needed to give that family some closure, be it a positive closure or a negative closure. But those children needed to know where their mother was.
My brothers and sisters were scared, and they didn't really know what was going on. They weren't sure. They were also like in shock. They were in disbelief. They didn't want to believe that my mother was gone. The hardest part was waking up in the middle of the night with my little sister screaming and crying and trying to run around the house looking for my mother.
Unmoved, Jose offers the children no hope. He insists he's innocent. And without a body, there's no proof she's dead. He could be telling the truth.
There is always the possibility that what Jose was saying truly happened.
But the evidence is stacking up against him. Tests now show that Jose's blood is type B, and the blood on the shirt found in his car is type A, like Rosa's.
I would say that with the information that I had and the evidence, the shirt, the earrings, my thought was at that point that she was not alive.
Now, certain that Sally is right about Rosa's death, Martin calls her again. The psychic has had another revelation.
This guy.
She asked me if Jose was likely to use abusive language with her in Spanish. And I told her, yes, he was a Spanish speaker. Because she kept hearing the word puta, something like that coming up.
He said, you think he called her that? That means whore in Spanish. And I said, no, I see it being written out. I'm being shown the letters. I'm convinced it's on a sign not far from where her body is. He said, well, there's the Puta Creek. That's it.
The Puta Creek happens to flow near Jose's labor camp. It covers a large area. Spurred on by Sally's vision, Martin spends days searching the surrounding fields and ditches.
You can see that it's just acres upon acres of different crops. And a lot of the grass that is left from the previous crops grows over the canals, over the drainage ditch, making it nearly impossible to look into them. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. My mindset was now that if he buried her in a ditch or in a canal somewhere where he only knows, there's a possibility that the body may never be found. And so I was already starting to toy with that idea that perhaps the kids would never have resolution or find the peace and at least being able to give her a proper burial.
For the next 10 days, the searches continue throughout the locality, but there is still no sign of Rosa. Could the psychic be wrong?
I wasn't worried about being wrong. I was frustrated. I was frustrated that I wasn't being shown more as to where she was. For some reason, all I was able to be shown was that sign, a ditch, and water not far away, and I knew she wasn't far away from the ranch.
I really didn't stop to analyze, well, is she really telling me, good information? Should I believe her anymore? Not really. I don't think that really came to play. I think Sally at that point was one more resource that I needed to use.
As the search for Rosa's body enters its 4th week, her family do everything they can to keep up public interest in the case.
I was feeling confused and maybe not really believing that she was really gone. This really dear friend of mine started helping me. She put it in the paper, I think, on the news, that we needed volunteers for a search. And we had a lot of people help. And we went out and searched for her to see if we could find her somewhere out there in the fields. We looked everywhere, ditches and canals and everywhere, and we just could not find her.
Meanwhile, Jose bides his time in silence. If they don't find Rosa's body, once he's served his drunk driving conviction, he'll be free.
If you don't have the body, if you will, you're not going to be able to convince a jury that he killed her. He's going to have to be released. He'll flee the area. And as the focus and the interest in the case dissipates, that's it. And the children would be left with this unresolved loss of their mother.
But psychic Sally Heading is still working the case. And a new vision could easily destroy any hopes Jose has of getting away with murder. Rosa Talamantes has vanished. She's presumed dead. The scant evidence points to her boyfriend, Jose, who insists he's innocent. He is jailed on a drunk driving charge while the police search for her. But after nearly a month, even with clues provided by psychic Sally Heading, Rosa's body can't be found. Martin Reese, a police officer and relative of Rosa's, knows that without a body, the killer will go unpunished, and Rosa's children will be left with the unexplained disappearance of their mother.
I thought that, yeah, he would probably get away with it because where we weren't finding her body, nobody had found her yet, and time was just going by.
Then Sally gives Martin some alarming news.
Sally mentioned that this was not something that Jose had done alone. I also knew Rosa was a fighter, strong. You couldn't just walk up and overpower her. So either Jose got her very, very drunk to be able to overpower her, or had help.
Following this new lead, Martin goes out to interview Jose's co-workers. Sally warns him it could be a mistake.
Well, I felt very strongly that it would be a wild goose chase. They wouldn't talk to him, that this man was someone they were afraid of, someone they were intimidated by.
Well, when I spoke with Sally on the phone, She told me that they would literally stonewall me, that they would not be cooperative. She said one of them would be dark complected and with tattoos on his arms.
I had the sense that he had a tattoo on his left forearm of Jesus, and that this man was going to be very disappointing to Martin. Like, how dare you come out here and ask us questions like this?
As Sally predicted, Jose's co-workers give nothing away. Soon afterwards, they disappear, leaving more questions unanswered. The search is losing momentum.
We began searching immediately after she went missing. And within days, of course, there was high publicity, a lot of interest, a lot of relatives and volunteers, friends of the family came together. But at some point, it was noticeable that the volunteers were not as many. Numbers were dwindling down.
The case was going cold. It can be somewhat depressing. We had these children who were grieving, and that to me was tugging at my heartstrings.
But Sally doesn't give up. She continues to focus on Rosa, hoping she might finally see a clue that will lead them to her body. Finally, Sally does see something new. It's an unexpected twist.
Sally told me that the body will not be found by the police, that somebody not official will find the body or a passerby.
This is good news. If Rosa's body is found soon, her children will be able to bury their mother and see her killer behind bars. And if Jose did kill her, alone or with help, they must find Rosa's body within the year, or he will have served his drunk driving conviction and, like his friends, vanish. It's a race against time. Then, exactly a month from the day Rosa disappeared, a farm worker discovers her badly decomposed body in a drainage ditch near Putta Creek. Her throat has been cut, and she is lying in a fetal position, exactly as Sally described it. Can Rosa's body now provide the evidence needed to convict her killer? Police piece together the events of that tragic night. Rosa had been dating Jose for several months, but his violent jealousy made her want to end the relationship. She began seeing another man. Elisa believes he was the father of Rosa's youngest child. They had been together before Jose appeared.
He was jealous of my mother leaving him to go and be with my sister's father. And I think he wanted to get rid of either him, the baby's father, or do something to my mother.
When he pulled up, she knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was going to murder her. She began to beg for her life. Please, the children, please don't. And it just continued to escalate and continue to escalate. And his language became more violent and foul. And when she saw the knife, she began to pray because she knew she was dead. And I could feel her energy absolutely frantic with fear. My children. Who is going to be there for my children?
When I found more information about the position and the location of the body, the fact that she was face down in a fetal position in a ditch, that the ditch had, at some point, had water in it, and that there was indication that her throat had been the point of injury, that matched up with the information that Sally had provided.
When they found her, I cried. I cried my eyes out. Because there's still a part of me that wanted to be wrong so she could still be alive. That would have been joyous to have been wrong about. Just joyous.
Rosa's body seals Jose's fate. Whether he acted alone or had help, no one will ever know. But forensic analysis puts him at the crime scene and proves it's Rosa's blood on his shirt. Jose is convicted of second-degree murder. His defense claims he'd been motivated by jealousy causing emotional distress. He was jailed for life and must serve 16 years before he can be considered for parole.